The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. One moment the evening air was calm, heavy with humidity, and the next, the sky turned the color of wet concrete. I remember standing by my living room window, watching the wind push the trees back and forth as if they were bending under invisible hands. My name is Emily Carter, and at the time, I lived alone in a small suburban neighborhood in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone waved politely but rarely spoke beyond that. Thunder cracked so loudly it rattled the glass. The weather alert on my phone warned of flash flooding and power outages. I unplugged a few appliances, lit a candle, and told myself it would pass. Storms always did, but that night, something felt different. The rain didn't fall, it slammed. The wind didn't blow, it howled. Within minutes, the streetlights flickered and went dark, plunging the entire block into an uneasy silence broken only by the storm itself. That was when I noticed my neighbor. His name was Daniel Brooks. He lived in the house directly across from mine. We had exchanged maybe a dozen words in the 2 years I'd lived there. He was quiet, always polite, always alone. He left early in the mornings and came home after sunset. If I'm being honest, I barely thought about him at all. But that night, during the worst storm I'd ever seen, Daniel was outside. I noticed him because a flash of lightning lit up the street, and there he was, standing in the pouring rain, wearing a dark jacket, looking toward the end of the block. At first, I assumed he was checking for damage, like everyone else probably was from behind their windows. But then I saw him start moving. Not toward his house. Away from it. I frowned, confused. The rain was coming down so hard it hurt to watch. Wind-driven sheets of water made visibility almost impossible. Yet Daniel walked with purpose, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Another lightning flash revealed something strange. He was carrying a flashlight in one hand and what looked like a rope or cable in the other. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Curiosity mixed with unease. Why would someone go out in a storm like that? And why toward the darkest, lowest part of the street, where water always pooled? I told myself to stay inside. That was the sensible thing to do. But the longer I watched, the more unsettled I became. Daniel disappeared around the corner near the drainage ditch that ran behind the houses. That ditch usually held a trickle of water. During heavy rain, it turned into a fast-moving stream. Minutes passed. The storm showed no sign of slowing. Thunder rolled endlessly, and the rain kept pounding the roof. I checked the time. 10 minutes. 15. He didn't come back. That was when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind. Then I realized it was a sound cutting through the storm, faint but unmistakable. Someone was yelling, not shouting words, just a raw, desperate cry. My heart started racing. I grabbed my raincoat, pulled on boots, and hesitated at the door. Every instinct told me this was dangerous. But another part of me, stronger and louder, told me I couldn't ignore it. Outside, the storm hit me like a wall. Rain soaked through my clothes instantly. The flashlight on my phone barely cut through the darkness. I followed the sound toward the drainage area, my shoes slipping in the water that now covered the street. Then I saw Daniel again. He was knee-deep in rushing water near the edge of the ditch. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as he struggled to hold onto the rope. And then I saw why. A car had slid off the road and into the ditch, half submerged, pinned against a concrete culvert by the force of the water. Inside, a woman was trapped, her hands pressed against the window, her face pale with fear. Daniel was shouting instructions, his voice nearly lost in the storm. He had tied the rope around a nearby tree, anchoring himself before wading into the water. The current was strong enough to knock someone over easily. I ran closer, yelling his name without knowing why. He looked up, startled. "Stay back," he shouted. "Call for help." My hands shook as I dialed emergency services, yelling our location over the roar of rain and thunder. I stayed on the line, relaying everything I could see. Meanwhile, Daniel kept working. He smashed the car's window with a tool I later realized was a small emergency hammer. Water poured inside, but he managed to help the woman climb out. She clung to him, terrified, as he guided her toward the bank, fighting the current every step of the way. Together, soaked and shaking, they reached solid ground just as headlights appeared at the end of the street. Emergency vehicles arrived, lights flashing red and blue through the rain. Paramedics wrapped the woman in blankets. She was alive, shaken, but alive. Daniel stood off to the side, breathing heavily, his hands bleeding from broken glass. When a paramedic tried to tend to him, he waved them off, insisting they help her first. I stood there, drenched and stunned, realizing that if Daniel hadn't gone out into the storm when he did, that woman might not have survived. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind flooded yards and fallen branches. Power returned the next morning. Life on the block slowly went back to normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. A few days later, I brought a small first aid kit and knocked on his door. He looked surprised to see me. Up close, he looked tired, older than I had realized. "I just wanted to check on you," I said. "After the storm." He hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. His house was simple, neat, almost bare. As he cleaned and wrapped the cuts on his hands, I asked him why he had gone out that night. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he told me the truth. Years earlier, during a similar storm in another town, he had heard cries for help and ignored them. He had told himself someone else would handle it. The next day, he learned a person had drowned nearby. The guilt never left him. So when I heard it this time, he said quietly, I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. The story spread through the neighborhood after that. People who had barely noticed Daniel before now nodded at him with respect. Some thanked him openly, others left small notes or gestures of appreciation. But Daniel didn't change. He didn't seek attention. He went back to his quiet routines. Except now, when storms roll in and thunder shakes the sky, I don't feel that same unease. Because I know that sometimes, the quietest people are the ones watching the closest, ready to step forward when it matters most. And every time the rain starts to fall hard, I remember the night my neighbor walked into the storm and did something that shocked us all.